Okay, now welcome to everybody else around the globe who has joined us for this International Day of Lockdown Territories Interactive Dialogue, with particular reference to the Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And it is IOJNK, that's Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir question time. The panelists we have today are Professor N.A. Shawl. He is the obviously executive member of this organization which is hosting this event, Organization of Kashmir Coalition. Then we have Lee Rhiannon. I can see her. Well, yes, she is there. Obviously, former Australian. Well, I think politician is never former. Politician is always a politician. So she's a politician, but former senator for New South Wales. And then between July 2012 and August 2018, elected at the federal election in 2010, representing the Australian Greens. And we have another Green, the founder of the German Greens with us, that is Frank Schwalbe-Hoth. So you can say hello to him.
Hello.
And then we move on to Professor Joseph Ronca. I don't see him yet, but he may be joining us later. Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed. He is a Laureate, academic and social scientist, and former Vice Chancellor of Sargodha University. He was here on assignment at the Oxford University some time back as well. So I see Dr. Ishtiaq. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. And of course, Claire Bidwell. I don't see her either. Perhaps she will join us later. Thereafter, Frank Schwalbe-Hoth, former MEP, founder of the Greens in Germany, and also probably the first, he will probably correct me later, for first Green MEP in the European Parliament and the German Parliament. Graham Wilson, I could see him. Yes, he is there. A very dear friend of ours, and pleads the cause of Kashmir very vigorously. He is chairman of Nations Without States, supporting a nation's right to self-determination, and hugely so. His work is immensely great. Mary Scully, I can't see her either. She may join us later. And Mrs. Shawl, probably Professor Shawl will be able to tell us. I don't see her either. And lastly, but not the least, Zubair Awan, who is the chairman of Kashmir Youth Assembly, but a lawyer by profession. He is a solicitor and does a lot of human rights work. Now, these are the panelists. And of course, for our interveners, we have Merit Fossey. She is there, but she is obviously is hidden. If she could switch on the camera, because she will be the first one to ask the question. And she is a very well-known journalist within the United Nations circle, based at Geneva. And she has a magazine called Diva, which is online. Latif Butt is here. Thank you, Latif, for joining us. Again, a journalist, and he runs a very powerful website by the name of Kashmir Watch, and one should go and visit that website all along. Cecilia Mahu, I see her name there. I would also suggest her to switch on the camera at some point. A lawyer again, and a human rights activist. Karen is there. Karen Rodman is there, of course, and she is based in Canada and justice peace advocate. And we will have a pleasure to hear her as well. Yasser Ahmed has not joined us as yet. Waqar Malik, I could see him earlier on, but he's there. Thank you very much, Mr. Malik. Obviously, he is also a very vocal journalist and pleading the cause of Kashmir very vigorously. And of course, he is Park Media Center. He runs Park Media Center. Sajid Yusuf, I could see him earlier. Yeah, he's there. Mr. Sajid Yusuf, again, a very dear friend of Kashmir Movement. He is also a journalist, a TV anchor, and runs lots of TV shows. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. And we have Amjad Abbasi and Ansar Ali Khan. Those are not yet on the screen. But we will now begin with our interactive dialogue. Professor Shawl, who is a Kashmiri, an intellectual, obviously, and who has been throughout working on the cause of Kashmir, will give us a background of today's interactive dialogue for about 2 minutes. Professor Shawl, it is just 1 minute. How can I only unmute? Professor Shawl, can you hear me? No. From your side. Can you unmute everyone?
Hello. Hello.
Professor Shawl.
Yes.
We can hear you now. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Barrister Thrombo. I welcome all the panelists, all the interventionists and the participants in today's interactive question time being held under the auspices of Organization of Kashmir Coalition to commemorate the 5th August 2019 assault on the state of Jammu and occupied Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, 5th August is symptomatic expression of Indian occupation in Kashmir, and 5th August 2019 was a black moment in the history of Kashmir, and this is being observed in different parts of the world, including the state of Jammu and Kashmir today. And we would like to express the opinion that this the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A that was brought about on this day tried to fragment the personality of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, and it also attacked. It was an assault on the identity of the state. It was a process to transform the state demographic structure. So it was aimed for a democratic re-engineering. But here I would like to say that ever since the saffronized Hindutva regime assumed power in Delhi, it has consistently pursued a militaristic and a muscular policy And this has been the character of the fascist regime. And this character manifestly expressed itself on 5th August, because taking benefit from the pandemic that was rocking the world, uh, they that imposed a lockdown, and under the smoke screen of this lockdown, they brought about lot of atrocities and repressive measures in Kashmir. But today, I will not I will not take much of your time, but because I think that we must intellectually delve upon on 5th of what happened on 5th of August, and what has happened during the last 2 years of the abrogation, because a lot of things have been changed, many laws have been enacted, and these laws are all directed towards the disempowerment of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And we also find that the response that should have been from the international community has not been coming up so far. And this is the time that international institutions, that those who have guaranteed the people of Kashmir their right to self-determination, and how they should come forward to undo what has been done in contravention to international law, in contravention to UN resolutions. And I think this is the time. To converge and to debate and to discuss the things, that what can be the way forward under these circumstances, because the intransigence of the Indian state is manifest, and they are bent upon changing the majority character of the state, as they are continuing with the transmigration, creating safe havens, and the process of West Bankization in Kashmir is also continuing. All these matters are matters of concern. In fact, people are now being what we call punished for their support to the freedom struggle, and they are being what we call they are being deprived of their fundamental rights, and most of the political leadership has been incarcerated. There is no democratic space for politics. So all these things have been happening, and these 2 years have seen lot of repression and lot of oppressive techniques going on in Kashmir. So I leave it to the best judgment of all of you to debate the fundamental question, that how the things can be improved, and what can be the way forward for the people of Kashmir to have a tryst with their destiny. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you for those introductory remarks, Professor Scholl. Now we will start the actual question and answer session. The first one to ask the question to all the panelists who are present is Merit Fossey. Merit, the ground is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrister Chambu, and I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon. I've heard what Professor Scholl said, and I was wondering, why hasn't this constitutional abrogation been taken to the International Court of Justice? Why haven't you gone there?
Very interesting question, Merit. I think legalistically speaking, I will first go to politicians, and I will possibly ask Frank to answer this question, and that will be followed by Zubair Awan, and then of course
Okay. My name is Frank Schwalbe-Roth. I'm sitting here in Brussels, and you see the stars of the flag of the European Union behind me. I think the question is simple. Why not International Court of Justice? Because if you look on the responsibilities of this court, it is focusing on the disputes between states. Disputes between states to avoid a war between countries. To now it has been, I think, 178 cases, when I remember well, which had been taken up by this court. But what state should complain? Pakistan, but India and a lot of other countries would not accept that the rights of Pakistan are hampered, are disturbed by this Indian decision. Therefore, I don't think that the International Court of Justice is the real body. I think there are other international courts, like the Criminal Court, but this International Court of Justice, I don't think, is the right place to bring it. On the other hand, if it would be there, wonderful, because I think it's Article 94, which gives the obligation to every country to comply with the decision. And if they don't do it, it's going to the Security Council. And every member state of the United Nations is automatically member of the International Court of Justice, not like the Criminal Court, where some countries have preferred to stay outside. That's my answer.
Thank you, Frank. Can all the speakers, panelists, please keep their answers within a minute, 1.5 minutes, maximum 2 minutes, please, because you have the set of questions. We have to get through lots of questions, so it would be helpful if it will be as crisp as possible. Joseph, I'm very glad to see you. Professor Joseph Ronca is obviously professor of Springfield College and representative for IASSW for the UN in New York, and on the executive committee for the UN NGO Committee on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I didn't introduce him earlier on because he wasn't then there, but it's always a pleasure to have you, Joseph. And is in United States, probably 6 o'clock in the morning there. No, unmute yourself.
Yes, 6 o'clock in the morning, and good morning to everyone, or afternoon or evening, whatever the case may be. Good to be here. I prepared a, well, what should we do?
No. Answer to Marriott's question at this stage, which is obviously why the matter is not being taken to ICJ.
Okay. All right. To tell you the truth, I don't know. And I don't know what profound thing I could say on this matter, except that there is just public sentiment in the world, I think, not to be so concerned about what's going on in the Kashmir region. I'm not really sure exactly, but I do know in the United States, I mean, especially in Indian-occupied Kashmir, Jammu, in the United States, my feeling is just in general that, if I may, the new commies are kind of the Muslims, and we don't kind of really care in the United States. And many of us have been socialized into thinking that Muslims are kind of the new enemies, no longer communists. And you see this in Walt Disney movies, you see this in advertisements. So it's more something that begins at an early age and has to change how we're socialized. So I don't have a profound answer to why we're not in the ICJ, not in the criminal court, but a lot of this I think has to do with how we're socialized.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Zubair Awan,
Yeah,
go
thank you
ahead.
so much, Barrister Trambu and all the panelists. And I think I'll just confine myself to 1 minute that you have very generously afforded to the very complex question that I think partly Frank Scholbahoff, Mr. Frank Scholbahoff has already tried to answer. I'll just simply build on it. And I think that's about the standing, what we call it as a locus standi. I don't think that the procedure and the substantive law concerning the parties to be able to bring the question in this instant, what we call it unlawful accession or purported accession of Kashmir on the 5th of August 2019 to the Federation of India. The point simply is whether or not any government, including the government of Pakistan, whether it has considered that this venue to be explored remains a question and a mystery. But it doesn't appear to be that this particular forum, or at least recourse to this particular forum, has been sufficiently considered. Then the point would have really come for the Court of Justice to rule on the point of standing, whether or not any government or cause has that standing. Albeit what Frank has just said, that the limitations on the procedural limitations on the states, whether the states can bring, in this instance, the first state that could have probably brought this question to the ICJ was Pakistan. However, it has not been explored that possibility. So in my point is, notwithstanding that the ICJ, whether or not that those procedural difficulties are there, it should be considered, and at least Court of Justice should be invited to rule on it, bearing in mind again that the law is a developing sense, in particularly international law. Obviously, we have very learned panel here, and they will be developing on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Awan. Lee, all the way from Australia, and I don't know what's the time there in, I think you are in Sydney.
Yes, I'm in Sydney. I do acknowledge the traditional owners of the First Nations, and we're in lockdown at the moment. So although I'm not with you in person, it is wonderful to be together. And there's so many events going on. I think it's worth saying at the outset that we can take great heart that although it's been 2 shocking years for the people of Jammu and Kashmir, the international support movement is truly growing. And as well as real events in real time with real people, they've been made so much on social media that for all the shortcomings, you can see it's awash with the slogans of let Kashmir, hashtag let Kashmir decide, hashtag red for Kashmir, hashtag stand with Kashmir. So this is a very good sign. So with regard to the question, because I know we don't have too much time, I would actually like to give emphasis, because I've read the questions, is to the importance of social movements. It's obviously my opening remarks. There's a lot of important questions here about the International Court of Justice, about what happened to the Constitution, etc. But experience shows that how we win these big battles when nations and people are denied their rights is we need big public attention. And I'll just give one short example to illustrate that. The great battle to end apartheid in South Africa was won because of public opinion. Nelson Mandela, 8 months after he was released, actually came to Australia. He thanked the trade union movement, he thanked civil society. And that's what put pressure on the politicians. And also, being frank about it, it puts pressure on courts as well, puts pressure on all the institutions when people see that the public opinion is shifting. And that's why I give such emphasis to, yes, we need to do our advocacy and our lobbying and all the rest, but we need to also be on the streets. We need to be on the social media. We need to be raising awareness with people why this is so bad. Because to finish off with the South African example, I can remember there was politicians in the Australian Parliament, a couple of them are still around, who supported racist South Africa. When the social movement in Australia brought thousands of people onto the streets, and they actually blockaded the Springboks going to the football grounds, and there was all these actions. In time, public opinion changed, and those same politicians who had been quite racist then became against apartheid. So bringing in strong social movements needs to be part of all these discussions. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lee. We now ask Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, please, sir. Doctor, we can't hear you. Sound is on probably low. Please, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, sort out your system first, please. In the meantime, I will go to Graham. Graham, you are on, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Majid. To answer that particular question, obviously it begets having a good legal background, why it can't go to various criminal courts or the UN. But I think in reality, there's no magic bullet to this. We all know that the UN Security Council will block most investigations. I don't believe that the Criminal Court of Justice has friends everywhere. Various states want to block things because they've got their own skeletons in their own cupboard. So I see the main aim's got to be create awareness. If you can use a court system to create that awareness, that's fantastic. But there's many other things we can use. But one thing I can say, unfortunately, there's no magic bullet out there, unfortunately, to put right the world's wrongs in this particular one. So I'd rather, I think we should spend a lot of our time talking about how we create that awareness and what we can do to try and make that awareness actually have an impact in the world. I think what Lee mentioned about social movements, yes, because social movements don't have a particular political bias, potentially, certainly not political parties. So that can bring in more people to support the cause without having to look at somebody's rosette. I think that's very useful. But ultimately, and I think we'll come back to it later, geopolitics is normally, or shall we say, the most favoured geopolitical changes are the route to success, the route to freedom. All the individual countries that have got self-determination, which I'm particularly supporting, it's all happened through geopolitical shifts. It's not because we've done it or because even they've done it. It's because things have changed around the world where countries no longer want to support a particular regime. And that's what we need to focus on. I'll maybe speak later, Majid. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you very much. Now we will have the last response from Claire. Claire, thank you very much for finally joining us. Very briefly, Claire Bidwell is co-founder of Let Kashmir Decide and a very, very strong human rights activist. Obviously, her lead role is on Kashmir, but generally she's a human rights activist. Claire, the question was, I don't know whether you heard it not, from Marit Fawzi, who is Geneva-based journalist at the UN, is why don't Kashmiris or any country go to ICJ if abrogation is so brutal?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Why don't they? They maybe should. I think, to be honest with you, there's some legalities or things behind that I maybe don't understand how it works. So that might be quite a tricky one for me to actually get my head around. But in terms of the everything that he is creating, doing, Modi, and he's done, there is certainly enough evidence there for him to be tried and be taken to the court. I mean, for me, I've come in late there. Sorry, I'm in Glasgow. I've moved from my usual environment and it's completely thrown me for getting set up. Yeah, sorry, losing on the question. For me, then there's a bigger thing at play here, isn't there? There's bigger schemes in terms of why the whole thing is there in the first place. So if I'm thinking about, you know, economy versus humanity, the power of India that they have in our world order, as it were, means that they get away with an awful lot, I think, because people don't actually want to upset any status quo. So if I'm thinking of the United Kingdom, for example, right now, that have just left Europe, you know, they're looking for trade deals, they're looking for their own economy, they're looking for their own selves. So for them, I think there's a big part of why a blind eye is being turned, because obviously we sell them the weapons, which then feeds our economy, and it just becomes this circle. And an overall feeling from the outside then is that they are, sounds terrible, you know, but they're feathering their own nest. So if we look then, you know, you've got to then look towards other countries about how they would be able to get the support behind them, and have the management to actually do that, because it's quite, I would say, quite a big, brave, bold challenge for somebody to take. So yeah, just the difficulties I slightly have with that are the you know, the legalities of it all on a big international stage. We've got, of course, the knowledge, the awareness, you know, people need to know, that needs to be out there, that needs to be clear. And it's not as well, you know, so much is hidden anyway as it is. So that, you know, would need to come forward and would need to be informed. But I think I'll leave that there, just based on the part of it. Perhaps I need to know a little bit more as a technical background as to why they, you know, what other difficulties there may be, if that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. I will give my input at the end, a very short one. Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, have you been able to sort out? Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed? You are, I see you are still mute. You are still mute, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed. I think we will have to move on. Very briefly, my take on ICJ is you can't go to ICC because neither India nor Pakistan have signed the Statute of Rome. So that is a no-go area. NGOs can go, but NGO matter has to be sent if it is a very, very strong case and on which we can work. The prosecutor has to send it to the Secretary General of the United Nations, and the Secretary General of the United Nations has to send it to the Security Council. So it's a long process in that sense. As to ICJ, no, NGOs can't go to ICJ. We would have loved to do it, but we are prevented by international law. It has to be a country, and perhaps the only country which has a sort of a stake to go is Pakistan. And why government of Pakistan has not decided, particularly following the 5th August brutal abrogation, why it has not decided to go to ICJ, only government of Pakistan can answer that. But yes, we as Kashmiris, we may be unrepresented peoples and nations, but we can't take the matter directly. So we have to look for a country that is ready and willing and prepared to take the matter to ICJ. Now we move on to the second question. Latif Bhatt, he is a Kashmiri and himself a victim of massive torture by the Indian occupying forces. He had to fled from Kashmir and seek asylum in Europe. He is now Brussels based. Mr. Bhatt, your question, please.
Welcome to all. My question is almost replied, so I will change my question. It is about the Kashmir dispute, where it stands now, And is it stronger at a diplomatic level or gone down after unconstitutional repealing of Article 370 followed by suppressive military lockdown, which still continues? And what should be our strategy to highlight the Kashmir at international level now when all the leadership in Kashmir has been put under arrest or restricted to do any political activities? Thank you.
Thank you, Latif Bhatt Saab. Dr. Ishtiaq, are you able now to speak? We are missing you very badly. I think you can now. Can you speak a little bit? Ask him. Dr. Ishtiaq, I think you have a problem there with your system there. You are still muted. We will then move on to Professor Shawl. If you could answer very briefly, as I said, please keep the answers very crisp. In fact, I had to ask just 1 minute before. Okay, go on, Professor Shawl. You can answer. I will have to go back to Marriott a little bit later. Professor Shawl, you are also muted. Can you unmute yourself first? Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted now. Mr. Latif has raised a very important question, that what should we do in the present circumstances, and is the pace of the struggle, or what can be the possible way forward? I think that is what he means. I would like to say that we hear a lot of noises in different places. These noises have to converge into some actionable activity. And the actionable activity is that we have to find out ways and means to raise this issue at the relevant fora. Mr. Thrumbu is right when he says that we cannot go to ICC because because both the countries have not signed the Statute of Rome. But at the same time, I think it is imperative for all the friends of Kashmir who support the Kashmir's freedom struggle, that they have to find out the ways and means to reach to ICJ, and from ICJ, at least this matter will be highlighted. That's number one. And this matter also needs to be taken up at the United Nations Security Council, because what India has done in Kashmir has been done unilaterally. And this is in contravention to international law. It is also in contravention to the guarantees of the UN itself, because Kashmir is a disputed mandated territory, and all these unilateral actions by the government of India have been taken in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir. Therefore, our friends, particularly in this case, those countries which are part of the contact group, they need to reach out to the UN Security Council and converge and convince the members to bring about some substantial difference to the conditions prevailing in Kashmir. Thank you.
Thrumbu Sahab, I'm on a different device now. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very well, sir, but we will get back to you very soon. I have your answer as well, but now you can do it later on yourself. Give me a few more minutes, sir. Thank
Okay,
you, sir.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Graham, do you have any views on this question where which Mr. Butt has asked? What can be diplomatically done? Leadership is inside. What are we going to do?
Well, clearly, diplomatically, we're talking about states, of course, not the rest of us. Really, unless a state is prepared to actually intervene, such as Pakistan with the going to court, etc., I don't see how, diplomatically we can get very far. All we can do is appeal to other states and looking for a champion. I've always believed that self-determination needs national champions, people who actually genuinely believe it. Sudan, for instance, South Sudan, when it became independent, had links with self-determinist groups around the world, as it perhaps would do prior to it becoming independent. But then it got a little bit cold feet since achieving that, as many states do, because I think Claire mentioned it, that people tend to go for the status quo and they're part of the club. And once you're part of the club, you don't really want to disrupt that club. You need to find friends. And therefore you don't want to upset people. So I think that's a very difficult and challenging answer, Majid. I think it's very, we're not statespeople, we're not representing governments here.
Absolutely correct, Graham. Thank you.
Final point, I do think we should, however, look for a genuine country or a country that genuinely believes in self-determination as a principle. Once we have that, that opens up so many doors in the international field. So keep looking, please.
Okay, thanks. Lee. Unmute yourself, Lee.
Yes, thank you very much. Look, I think what's very important with this question as well, it's the need to change the narrative about how this is all playing out. I do think we need to sometimes just step back and look at the causes. And like India is a huge roadblock on what we're dealing with here. I think we do need to name it. And what's very interesting is, like I imagine it happens in other countries, in Australia, India gets really positive coverage. It's presented as this incredible, colourful, exciting India. Our government's very pro-India. So building up awareness around this issue is very challenging. But there's a lot of solid evidence, both in terms of the analysis of what's going on in India and also from what India is doing itself. So first off, the Genocide Watch. I'd really recommend people look up the work of Dr. Gregory Stanton. He calls it for what it is. And he talks about how the preconditions to genocide are occurring. And the acts of genocide are all around you when you start looking into it. And then on top of that, there's the jihad marriage, which is effectively the criminalisation of people marrying across faiths. Now, that's got echoes back to what happened in Germany in the 1930s. Again, these are issues that help illustrate to people what is really happening in that country. The big one is the demographics. This is huge. The way India is actually copying the tactics of Israel, how Israel is dealing with the Palestinians, because it's a settler colonial country now, where you bring in literally thousands of Indian troops and their families to live in Kashmir. That will, in time, and possibly quite quickly, change who the majority, or who is the majority in that country, which has implications if we ever get to having a vote for a plebiscite, which what many of us are aiming for. Where does that leave us? Like, we're talking about our tactics. Similarly, BJP has its long-term plans as well. So, yes, I think this discussion around these issues about what's happened in the Constitution is very important, but let's also look at where India's at. So I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Lee. Frank, please, you raised your hand, please.
Yes, two short points. The first, diplomatic does not mean automatically states. Diplomatic means the international community, which includes states, social movements, and others. Second point, it is a long-standing struggle around Kashmir with main combatants, and one of them is India, And with the decision 370 constitutional change, they made a move forward. We have now Olympic Games, therefore let's go to judo. Combatants are in front, and the incredible thing is in judo, if you do a waza or a chukuri or whatever, one of these names for these moves, you are strong, but you put yourself as well in a weak situation if the other person can counterbalance your move. And I think the 370 was a very strong waza, chukuri or kushusi, but it was and is considered all over the world, most over the world, as illegal. That means the Indian position is not necessarily stronger, but weaker. And therefore it is to us, the diaspora and the people inside the Kashmir, to show that it was illegal and make out of this 370 activity something which is weakening the other side because they behaved illegally. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, please, you may very briefly answer to Merit's question, and the new question is, why are, after abrogation, are we gone diplomatically weak? You have to unmute yourself again. You are muted. Yes.
Every crisis is an opportunity. Obviously, the cost of the crisis is paid by the Kashmiri people. But even if we count the day August 5, 2019, I think that day India unilaterally violated the UN Security Council resolutions by dividing and annexing the disputed territory. Now, since Pakistan was a party, Pakistan, I believe, should have immediately gone to the International Court of Justice. You know, even if it's a question of jurisdiction, whether it is Article 36(2), which is about compulsory jurisdiction, if India doesn't agree, then nothing will move forward. But, you know, Article 36(1), in which the Kulbhushan Yadav case was decided, Pakistan can always go there because it's a violation of international law. Pakistan and India are parties to this, you know, UN Security Council resolution. So therefore, at least an attempt can be made. At the end of the day, if the ICJ does not agree that it does not have any jurisdiction, that's a different matter. But not a single attempt has been made since August 5, 2019. Now, second point is diplomatically. Apart from one discussion that took place inside the Security Council, what else Pakistan has done? You know, we had that great opportunity after August 5, 2019, and we have this opportunity since then, you know, because what is happening is that India is playing with the identity of Muslim Kashmiris, with their demography, with their employment, with their territory, land, and everything. So these two crimes on the part of India, one hitting the self-determination issue by violating the UN Security Council resolution, and then by changing the demographics of the situation, you know, Pakistan has had this unique opportunity. Let me say as to what is hampering Pakistan. You see, unlike the past, we can never question the intention of the Pakistani nation when it comes to Kashmir. Problem is that this hybrid regime that we have in the country, it is busy mostly in managing the political and economic dynamics at home. So that is having a huge cost on its core foreign policy matters, including Kashmir. And what we come across, Trumbo Saab and other friends, is that Prime Minister on the eve of Azad Jammu and Kashmir elections proposing a referendum in which the question will be placed before the people of AJK, whether they want to be part of Pakistan or be independent. Well, we have not been able to get justice for the Kashmiris on the basis of the UN Security Council resolutions, and we are coming up with these hypothetical narratives. Problem is, the need of the hour upon the leadership of Pakistan is to focus on the core issue, which is always the self-determination, and then focus on the issue that is emanating from there, which is that Kashmiri identity, Kashmiri demography, Kashmiri destiny is being abrogated by India ever since then.
Okay, thank you, sir. Claire, can you hear me? I think Claire is moved away a little bit. Mr. Avan, again moved away. Joseph, very crisp thoughts on diplomatic situation. You are muted. You are muted.
I was going to make a comment in the chat. I still have to go back to the fact that I feel the real issue is how our children are socialized into understanding the Kashmiri conflict and also the conflict of all oppressed people throughout the world. I mean, what are written in the textbooks? I would imagine they're very conservative, and school boards tend to be conservative. And related to that, I'm thinking of these decades of human rights education that we've had over the years. In other words, we have to socialize our children into thinking that the principles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the documents that come after that need to be lived. And the right to self-determination has not been given as much credence as it should be. I mean, it's in the UN DRIP and it's in the ICCPR and the one on economic and social rights, but it needs to be emphasized and needs to be discussed in ways that children understand. And then they grow up, and then we'll be in the criminal court, and then we'll be whatever. Thank you. So we gotta have to wait. We need patience.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph. Claire, very quickly, diplomatic pressure. Have you
I mean,
forgotten it because Modi government has done this brutal abrogation?
Yeah, I mean, to just pick up on what was being said there, you know, I work in a school where human rights are being taught. The children know their rights, their articles, their charters. The trouble is, as we know at the moment, you know, UN isn't functioning as it should be. So we can sit here and say that's not being met, this isn't being met, but our hands are very much tied. I don't have a lot of patience, I'm afraid. So for me, I'm not prepared to wait until the children have grown up. I do think it's very important that we do that, but we have to get ahead of that as well. So for me, it's very much this people movement because it's been hidden. So to pull in for the self-determination, that's a unifying call, you know, and that can be echoed louder. You know, for me, ground up on the street, the common people like myself, we need to bring them along because once the people realize, as Lee said earlier, the narrative, and we pull that together, with all the best will in the world, we can have all the best legal things in place, but we're human beings. We don't need any legal technology to tell us what's happening right there is right. You know, can you imagine a woman being raped and somebody stays there and says, well, actually, under Constitution XYZ, you know, that's we're human beings and we can stop that. And we saw the Black Lives Matter movement, the way they came out on the street. I fully believe, you know, if people find, you know, more people know exactly what is going on, they'll be out on the streets, but they won't be throwing statues in the street. You know, they'll be going up to their politicians and they'll be hammering on the door. To briefly allude to something earlier else, I have high hopes with the Scottish government. I know we devolved to the UK, but they're passionate about their self-determination. They're a very outward-facing country. They're human rights, and I've seen it on the ground. They're so empathic. They are an untapped, for me, source. So being in Scotland and a grassroots movement. So I feel very encouraged. The day that Modi locked down India, I think is the day that he gave the key to their freedom. And I think we have to believe that and keep going forward for that and raising that away and using we may not know where the answer comes from. So patience is good in some circumstances, and obviously, and you know, that's a great one for educating the children because they're the politicians of the future and we have to do that. But we need to make traction now because we haven't got time to wait. Kashmir won't be there if we wait for the children to go up. So self-determination and people power and looking for, you know, unity and looking for the solutions. And you know, I'm determined and I'm sure we will together, we'll find the way through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Zubair, very crisply, diplomatic, Latif Butt's question, are we failing?
Well, thank you, Barrister Trambu. No, I don't think that we should conclude that we are failing, but definitely I think there are various factors, and I really echo what Dr. Ishtaq Ahmed and Claire just said. And while every crisis is an opportunity, and that opportunity has to be availed to take the process further to the children and to the youth. While that may be a medium to long run policy and strategy, but definitely the diplomatic efforts are the exhibition and expression of the civil society engaging through their governments. And as Frank just said, that includes all the components of the international community. What I would say is that the pandemic has really created a lot of, whereas it has created difficulties, it has also created opportunities. And the way we are now going through this virtual conference, the key point is continuing our efforts to create more and more awareness of the situation in Kashmir and take it to the next level where the governments, respective governments, are encouraged to have their say and engage more and more on this gruesome purported accession by India and onslaught on the human rights of the Kashmiris.
Thank you, Zubair. Merit, can you hear me? Merit? I think she is gone. But Latif Bhatt, you are there. Abdul Latif Bhatt, you are there. You heard everybody. Very, very quick response. How far you are satisfied?
Thank you very much. Yes, they are right that we should continue our efforts as per our capacity. But there is one dimension emerging that I want to address. It is about when India scrapped the Article 370 and then put restrictions on political activities. Now the India is trying to push the young generation into the militancy, and we are seeing that daily basis that many encounters are taking place, and mostly they are fake encounters. And now we have a hotspot. A militancy hub is emerging from Kabul and Afghanistan, and we are afraid that this hotspot will provoke militancy in Kashmir, and this is the question we should address and try to mobilize diplomatic at diplomatic level that India is actually not helping to restore peace, but they are anti-peace in Kashmir.
Thank you, Latif Bhatt. I see that Shamim Shawl has joined us. Thank you very much for joining. Obviously, she is president of Kashmir Women's Movement and permanent representative to the United Nations of an MWU. Now, I will, obviously, Marriott is not there, but we will go to the third intervener now, Cecilia Mahu. Cecilia Mahu, are you there? I can see her, but I think she is not there. Cecilia, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Can you please, can the panelists have your very valuable or valued question, please?
Okay, my question is, how the struggle for self-determination of the people of Jammu and Kashmir be taken to a logical conclusion when there is a Utah assault on Kashmiri's identity, land, and employment, and fragmentation of the state?
Thank you very much, Cecilia Mahu. What Cecilia is asking is, where is now the issue of self-determination after abrogation and fragmentation of the state? I suppose Mrs. Shawl has just joined us. Mrs. Shawl, can you hear me? Mrs. Shawl, can you hear me? Mrs. Shawl, can you hear me? You're muted. Okay, I don't seem to get through to Mrs. Shawl. Frank, can you, you are still unmuted. Frank, can you please take this question? You are also muted, Frank. No, you are muted, Frank. You are muted. Okay, let's leave Frank for the timing. Graham. Audio, all the unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Can you
Okay,
please?
I'll go back and mute and put Mrs. Shaw on.
It was host to unmute us.
No, it wasn't muted by me. But anyway, Mrs. Shawl, self-determination. And is it now a big question mark because of the abrogation and fragmentation of the state? Please, very quickly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trambu. Thank you, the team and the organizers and my panelists. I was busy in a television show. I'm sorry I have not heard everybody. But when we say that it is the abrogation, it is the assault on identity, it is a fragmentation and demographic reengineering. Yes, it is the Indian assault and it is Indian design. But what we have to do as Kashmiri, it is our responsibility, it is our duty to fight for the right of self-determination as India was fighting against British rule. And what was done at that time, they were not stopped to get it. And that is why when we say right of self-determination, India can do anything. He has already 500,000 army men there. They have abrogated all laws, but they cannot win the hearts of the people of Jammu and Kashmir. They cannot ask us to leave this demand of right to self-determination. It is our demand, and we have to fight for it.
Graham, I go to you now.
Thank you, Majid. Some of us have always believed that self-determination was the answer to the Kashmiri issue. Perhaps some others in the international community haven't quite seen that, but things have changed, and it's a little bit linking what Frank said about the judo throws. What's changed before Article 370 was abrogated, before it was repealed, there was a stable status quo. You know, both sides just left Kashmir as it was for many, many years. Certainly legally and diplomatically, nobody wanted to really make a big fuss over matters. It was just left as it is. But India's made the first move, the first judo move. It's an attempting, obviously, to integrate Kashmir totally within India. And we know trying to create loyalty to the Indian state amongst the youth. It perhaps wants to bring in migration. I think Lee mentioned that, to change the demographics of Kashmir. So they've started it. They've decided they want to totally integrate Kashmir into India, make it another region of India with no differences. So clearly, the only answer, if you don't agree with that, is self-determination. And whilst we don't have the power to give them self-determination, we do have the power to promote the principle. So it's not just about the normal human rights of people to protest, not to be arrested without trial, etc., etc. It's also the human right of self-determination, which ironically, the UN says in its charter, that is a human right. But unfortunately, most of its members don't act on that basis. So I do think that is the logical conclusion. And India started it by their attempts to remove Kashmir as at least a semi-separate area of India. So I think it's very important that we promote that, because that is the only way we can get a solution ultimately that Kashmiri people will accept. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Claire, please.
Yeah, hello. Well, building on from what Graham said there, for me, self-determination is a basic human right enshrined in the UN treaty. So you've got that there straight away. What I would add further to that is we've got, indigenous people here, that have been technically removing from their land. And there's also a lot of legislation or written work about the rights of indigenous people. And they've been told, here's what you're doing, this is what's happening to you, partitioning here, going here, all these UN resolutions. Where's their voice for these people that have their own culture, their own ways? They're being totally trampled on and, holding on to this for a long time. So for me, there's so much within there that we've got that we can fight for the Kashmiris. So self-determination, yes, is that perfect aim for me. And then we've got all the umbrella factors under there.
Thank you. Frank, please. You are muted, Frank. You are muted.
Okay. Yeah. Certainly, self-determination is the answer, but self-determination is not only for Kashmir. We have 193 countries in the United Nations, and we have about 3,000 languages spoken all over the world. And in general, a language is linked to a group of population who wants a certain self-determination, a certain possibility to live in dignity. That means there are so many other places in the world where this is or will become a burning issue. Therefore, I'm not surprised when a lot of resistance exists against self-determination. Second, as you've said, I'm one of the co-founders of the German Greens. That was 1980. Afterwards, I've been a member of parliament, I've been in charge of the European Office of Greenpeace, and I learned that in politics, it's always necessary to know what do you want, long-term, medium-term, long-term. Second, who are your possible partners? And three, and this is a key issue, who is your adversary? What does your adversary want, and what are the options of your adversary? Now I have to admit to you, Majid, when at the end of the last century, you contacted me and said, Frank, come on in the boat for Kashmir, I said yes. Then I analyzed the options of the adversary, and I thought if I would have been Indian chauvinist politician, like Modi now, but at that time I had no idea that Modi existed, I would have modified this 370. I would have used the way a lot of other countries are using ethnic cleansing or ethnic diminishing of the numbers, the demographic arms. Look on regions like Tibet. Look on what we've seen in former Yugoslavia, what we see now in Ethiopia. Ethnicity, ethnic fight, changing of demography is always a weapon. And I'm very astonished that India took so many years to abolish this 370. I'm only surprised, and therefore we should know that those issues, that these would have been used as arms by India, even if we don't want it. And we would have been totally, and we are totally opposed to it.
Thank you, Frank. Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, self-determination. I know you touched it briefly previously, but is self-determination, what Cecilia has asked, is it gone now because of the fragmentation and the abrogation?
Well, I think so far what we have seen in the last 2 years is a major transition, and I think so far diplomatically, even in legal terms, India apparently has succeeded. It has succeeded because the other party to the dispute, Pakistan, is virtually silent and is pursuing a policy of restraint. What is happening in Kashmir is that situation has moved beyond freedom to the issue of Kashmiri life. Because the more India integrates this disputed region into its union fold, it can argue that what is this self-determination? It is a part and parcel of the Indian, union, and we are implementing the laws which are applicable elsewhere. And in the grave of that, they are going to change the Kashmiri demography, the Kashmiri identity, and the very fact of life in Kashmir against the interests and aspirations of the Kashmiri people. So I think the India has leveled up the conflict. It has taken it to a next level where the issue of self-determination, India would deliberately try to undermine it further if there is no response from Pakistan. That is my fundamental opinion. I will continue to uphold this.
Thank you, sir. Zubair Awan, please. Self-determination, is it gone?
Thank you, Barrister Trambu. I think the question really raises a serious concern and very important question. We were obviously, as a Kashmiri nation, struggling to get to the level we can get the right to self-determination through the agreed upon mechanism by the United Nations. What has been happening since the last 72 years, that it has, rather than making progress on that course by the respective parties, including India and Pakistan, the onslaught by the Indian authorities directly by abrogating Article 370 is on one hand, which is very clearly very much unlawful and in the face of its commitment to the international community through the United Nations resolutions. What is ironically, I would say sad equally, is maybe a refined or maybe not very clearly or sufficiently thoughtful process by the other party, who is and the nation, as Pakistan nation, in support of the Kashmiris' right to self-determination, is some political moves that we see, including purported or provisional accession of certain parts of the other side of Kashmir, including GB, Gilgit-Baltistan, to Pakistan. I think that is what is very serious, and through this forum I really hope and pray that the great supporter of Kashmiri cause, namely Pakistan, and through Pakistan all the relevant fora in the international community, will be sensitized to the issue, and we should be able to focus on this. So this is on this unlawful abrogation of 370 and annexation of Kashmir to Indian Federation, highlight that and make progress towards the right to self-determination. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire, did you deal with this question, self-determination and the abrogation and the fragmentation has changed the dynamics on Kashmiri self-determination?
Yeah, I know I just answered a little bit on this. There's a slight different angle on it. Yeah, sorry, to add to what we were saying earlier, I mean, for me, the self-determination hasn't gone away and is still there. And then, so what we've all got a different role to play. I think that's sometimes what's very difficult. This question is thrown at us: how are we going to solve this? And it's like, well, we can't solve that as one person. So in a way, I'm not, sometimes, I'm not working at the diplomatic level, but I can connect with people that are. And I think we can all look at, well, where's our role in this? So if I think, for example, that another country could stand up and push for self-determination for Kashmiris, then my work could go towards evolving those. And I mean, I see, for me, it's like bringing the people along, creating that army, because that's how we will get our governments to step up. If they've got a country on their doorstep rioting because this other country aren't being given their rights for self-determination, it's always going to be an option. It's always going to be there. He can revoke whatever he wants, but there is under laws as well, but just under human being laws, that self-determination is always there. And as far as I'm concerned, it's just given us more ammunition and the tools to, as Graham said, he's made a move. What's our move? And really that should rise above anything we've ever done before. Pull together all that resilience, all that knowledge, all that work that everybody's held on to so tightly for 70 years and built up. And now's the time to bring it all out, and start throwing it and finding where our role is in it. Because there's a temptation for all of us to say, Pakistan need to do this, and these need to do that, and they need to do that, without knowing all the undercurrents. So it's sometimes you know, we can have, yeah, we could try that. We could try, we've got to have lots of different things going on at the same time, but without diluting our efforts. So, you know, we can have these, and very often there's different reasons for why certain countries or people or organizations aren't taking the steps that they are taking. There's other dynamics at play. So it gets very, very complex, but pulled back to me, no, self-determination is always a right. It's always there. It's made no difference. If anything, it's given us more ammunition and more strength.
Thank you, Claire. Cecilia, do you want to add anything what you heard on your question on self-determination and how the abrogation has affected it? But what the general view is, it hasn't. Cecilia, you are muted. Do you want to have few remarks on the answers you received? You are muted. Cecilia, if you can unmute yourself. Otherwise, I will go to the next. Yes, Cecilia. Now, let me go to Karen. Oh, Cecilia is now. Yes, Cecilia. Yes, please go ahead.
I'm okay with the response. I think.
Okay, we have lost you. Yeah, you are back.
My connection is not very good.
Yes.
My
Okay,
connection to internet
we
is
will
not
leave
very
it there. We will leave it there. Okay, thanks very much for your question, Cecilia. Now we go to Karen Rodman. And Karen is, I think, in Canada. Am I right?
I am. I'm on the indigenous land of Turtle Island, and thank you very much for including me as one of the interveners. Much of my question my original question has been answered in many ways. So I think maybe I would come back to the accountability of member states, if I could, and specifically Fourth Geneva Convention. And it would seem certainly after the abrogation of and the unilateral revocation of Article 370 and 35A, that Fourth Geneva Convention would have standing, although lawyers on the panel may comment differently. But I come back to Article 1 specifically and our own member states' accountability and related to holding up the convention under all circumstances. Therefore, as Canada probably heads into another election being announced next week, and for any member state that is a high signatory of the Fourth Geneva Convention, what is our accountability under Article 1, and how can we use our own domestic law? In our case in Canada, we have laws around sanctions that are often misused, but do apply when there are gross and systemic human rights violations, as well as other domestic law. So how do we use international and domestic law in our mobilization to hold our member states accountable at the UN, and what specifically should we be looking to try to diplomatically and otherwise influence the United Nations, be it the Security Council, General Assembly, or other bodies in that accountability?
Thank you very much, Karen. The question in a nutshell is really accountability under international law and domestic law. And I will start with Professor Joseph Ronca, sorry. No, can't hear you, can't hear you. That is one.
Okay, got it. Okay,
got
it's annoying. Sorry.
You heard question from.
I heard the question.
Well, she is your neighbor. You are in States and she is there, so you are North America.
Okay, I'm on Turtle Island too. So in the United States of America, not America, because there's North and South America, the United States of America. That's imperialism, if I ever heard it, to even call the United States America, but that's besides the point. The right to self-determination will not go away. First of all, it is in Article 1 of the ICCPR.
Yes.
And I call it SESCAR, economics. And we have to see every 5 years or so what governments are doing in regards to that. I know that my government always speaks about the right to self-determination being abrogated on the island of Cuba. That's very strange because in Cuba, by and large, everyone has health care. In the United States, roughly 30% do not have health care, just by a way of, just to make one point. But I have to say, I feel that the best policy instrument around is getting the facts out there and letting people make up their own mind. Hey, look at this, look at that. What can we do about it? And I've mentioned this before. I really think we need some kind of international week for self-determination, or an international decade for self-determination, so we can get people talking. I prepared some comments, but let me say something now. It's really interesting. This August 5th is 3 days away, or is it 4 days away? August 9th, I believe, is the International Day of Indigenous Peoples.
Yeah.
And also August 5th and August 9th is when my country dropped the atom bomb on what's called the yellow people, and we're the white people. Something this week maybe could be some kind of international week of self-determination. And these other days could bolster the world to look at the right to self-determination. It won't go away. And I have to go back to what I said before. We need children's books on this stuff. I've been saying this for 30 years. Talk about the right to self-determination in ways that children understand, and also, of course, work reactively and work on ways that the ICJ and the ICC can deal with this issue rather than proactively. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Shawl, second professor to follow on this Karen's question, and very briefly. No, you're muted. No, you're still muted, Professor Shawl. I can see it. Now you are okay.
I think the question of accountability is very right. And recently, in one of the reports that the UN Human Rights Commissioner submitted in July 2018, in which it was said that the right of self-determination of the people is guaranteed and protected under international law. So if it is so, if it is a guaranteed right, it cannot be taken away, and the states need to be made accountable for the commitments that they have made internationally, because violation of international law and violation of international commitments asks for an intervention from the UN body, because the organization that can be of some use to prevent India from total annexation of the state is the UN Security Council. It is obligatory on the UN Security Council to uphold what it decided some time ago. And one more thing that I would like to add is that one of the things that has been missing in the narrative that was built up after the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A is that the constitutional link between India and the state of Jammu and Kashmir does not exist, because Kashmir, as per after the abrogation, does not continue to be a part of the Indian Federation. So it amounts to total colonization, and it amounts to what we call to complete separation from the Union. And because India has not only bulldozed the international law, it has bulldozed its own constitution also for achieving this. This thing has not been very well presented in the narrative that has been that has been floated after this abrogation. And one more thing is that we must introspectively also look at this matter when it comes to accountability. We, as the people of the state, need to converge on one narrative and one command, and this has to be one of the important cornerstones of the freedom struggle. Freedom of struggle will continue, but the only thing is that we also need to make certain correctives, and we also need to we need to impress upon our friends that they have to be objective and proactive in the international corridors of diplomacy, because without that proactive diplomacy, without what we call efforts being made in different fora, we cannot be able to achieve what we should have achieved long back. And therefore, my last remark is that we have to not only introspectively look at this matter, but we have also to make those people accountable who claim to be our well-wishers.
Thank you, Professor Shaw. Graham, very briefly, please.
Try to be very brief, Majid. I don't think we're going to get anywhere in terms of solutions from the international community of states. They're too far gone, too many skeletons. It's a cozy club, and those that join it seem to surrender their original principles. I think I'm all in favour of lobbying. We should lobby them. We should embarrass them. We should, bring it out, whether it's on the streets or whether it's actually in the UN Security Council. End of the day, even if the states did suddenly have an epiphany moment, what would happen is the Security Council would veto it. But we should lobby. What we've got to look for is, very briefly, in the short term, a champion. I said we need a state champion of the principle. Might be Scotland, but they'd have to be independent first. But either way, we need to look for we need a champion. South Sudan was the one I was hoping for. Not so sure now, and it's got its own problems. In the that's the short term. In the long term, you need young people, I think, as Joseph said. It's obviously a long-term plan. And we just need to create awareness by using all the international tools that are at our disposal, even though we won't get success at this stage. I want to see Woodrow Wilson's 1918 belief in self-determination as the principle of international relations brought back. That's what I would aim for. So all to play for, Majid. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire, you heard Graham, and particularly seeking independence for Scotland. So accountability is the question, but please, you can answer Karen's question.
I'm going to have to change my tactics now and become a Scottish independence supporter, aren't I, for a first step? I'm just going to, obviously that's quite a legal question for me, and that's for why I would allude to educating the children, which somebody said earlier. If I'd had books when I was younger about Indigenous people, rights for self-determination, any of those literature, then I would have now grown up with that knowledge, and I could have answered that question like a pro. So I would just add on in terms of, from a common person's perspective, we've all got our role to play, and everything that everybody suggested there is a step towards a solution. And so, yeah, opportunities like this are fantastic, and this is a really good idea, this interactive session, because we don't have to repeat things, and it's throwing ideas in our heads. And so again, a little thing, it's not a little thing, it's a huge thing, but ideas like this where we are coming together and things I don't know, somebody else know. It's just fantastic. So all of this, all of everything that everybody said towards a solution, and I'll go away and be my William Wallace for a while then. So if you don't see me, you know what I'm up to.
Yeah, thanks very much, Claire, for your participation. Dr. Ishtiaq, please.
Well, just hold on. Yes. Basically, on the question of
accountability is the question, sir. Accountability
yes.
is from Karen, the question.
Yes.
Why are not
So,
you holding the world accountable for whatever is happening in Kashmir?
Why not hold India accountable for whatever is happening in Kashmir?
The silence itself is accountability, sir.
Trumbo Sahib, you are an international jurist. I will pose certain questions to you because I would like to know your opinion. You know, when India unilaterally annexes the territory and divides it before annexing it, was that not a violation of international law? Then what flows from there is three instances I will point out to you. The new Domicile Act, which has already awarded 750,000 non-Kashmiris, Indian citizens, mostly security personnel, Kashmiri residency. Number two, the new Land Act is allowing Indians to go into occupied territory and repurpose agriculture land, which constitutes 90% of the territory of the occupied region. Then you have the delimitation process, whereby the Hindu majority Jammu will get majority of seats in the legislature in any political dispensation in the future.
Yes.
All these three steps which I have pointed out, which flow from the illegal act of August 5, are they legal in any? So my next question is, what do you think of the ICJ option ultimately, internationally speaking, if it is an international law violation, August 5 and beyond? And also, I would like to know whether any Indian or Kashmiri civil society within the Indian Federation, have they gone to the Supreme Court or any litigations on the matter, and what has been the outcome so far in terms of domestic law violations?
Thank you, sir. It needs a lot of time to respond to your questions, but yes, absolutely correct. More than 300 new statutes from the Indian Parliament have been introduced in Kashmir, and about 270 the Kashmiri statutes which were on the statute book have been repealed, giving a complete legal overhaul of the state of Jammu and Kashmir within the occupied territory. That is your absolutely correct analysis. As to obviously ICJ, as I said earlier, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, you need a country. And obviously there can't be any better supporter of the Kashmir or stakeholder of the Kashmir cause than Pakistan. Why Pakistan has not taken the matter to ICJ is still a question mark for me as well, because I believe that the gruesome on the brutal abrogation was direct intervention and contravention of the United Nations resolutions on Kashmir, the Security Council resolutions on Kashmir, and Pakistan ought to have gone to ICJ. We still today would insist upon Pakistan that they should and they must invoke that procedure, and that is the right thing to do, and it is the international sort of remedy that you have available and that you should make a use of it. Now, very specific to Karen's question, accountability internationally and domestic. Domestic wise, you have no remedy. everything has been closed down for Kashmir. You have so many statues related to the military, which is Afsa is very well known. You can't challenge anything what army personnel or those so-called security forces personnel do in Kashmir. That is not challengeable. So you don't have a domestic remedy at all available. The international one, again, it's a very much, and I will be quite blunt. Anything to do with self-determination issue is a political question. It's not a human rights question in the real world. It is what the big states, it is what the big powers want to do. That is what will happen. So we have not yet gathered that much or mustered that much support where the United States, United Kingdom, France, or China, even for that matter, or Russia for that matter, the permanent members of the Security Council will sit together and say, yes, self-determination issue ought to be addressed because they have their own problems. So it's a political question, and we have very limited international options. Coming back to Dr. Ishtiaq's again issue is, yes, I understand that some of the public interest litigations, as it is called in India, PIL, have been filed in the Indian Supreme Court on the abrogation. And obviously, the judiciary, the way it has been composed in India now, is very much on the right wing side. So it's Modi's choice who is the Chief Justice of Supreme Court of India, or who are the sitting other judges there. So that has been put on the back burner in the Supreme Court. So although that option has been taken on by some of the litigators, but it has not been yet heard. So I understand very recently, if you would have seen it, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, the Indian mainstream leaders were brought to Modi to meet, but they were told outside the meeting door before going to see Modi, saying, don't raise the issue of abrogation because it is sub judice. So that is the position that is there. I will conclude with this. Karen, your last remarks, you heard everybody, including me.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also do think there is accountability as much as we can, not only on the streets, but using our own exposure around our own domestic laws where they apply, and raising Article 1 to our own politicians of the 4th Geneva Convention as well. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Now, I don't know whether Waqar Malik is there. I think he's gone for a couple.
I'm here.
You are there. Mr. Malik, your question, please. Can you come on the screen, sir, please?
I am here on the screen, yes. Can you see me?
Well, at least I can't see you. I don't know about others.
Yes, okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Tambu. And
I can't see you, Waqar. I can't see you. You're not on.
Yes.
Your video is, now you are on. Yes, please.
Yes, I'm on. Yes. I'm here. Actually, thank you very much, Mr. Tambu, and all the participants. My question is, the COVID-19 hampered the Kashmir awareness campaign worldwide. What strategies should be now adopted to highlight the Kashmir issue as the COVID-19 restrictions are slowly easing worldwide? Please.
Frank, you are the best person to answer. Frank, now you are muted. Unmute yourself, please. Frank, we have last few minutes. You have to be quick, please. No, you can't, we can't hear you. You are still muted. I can see that. Now you are not, probably. No, you are still muted. Okay, we probably go to Claire then. Claire, you heard the question. COVID-19 has been used by India, and it has affected our campaign worldwide?
So for me, when the COVID came in, we were on the verge of going to Muzaffarabad to have an event over there, stream it worldwide across the world in an attempt to build up a united movement. In came COVID, took that opportunity away from us. So what we've done over this time is to forge these amazing links. I don't think we've wasted that time where we couldn't get out and couldn't do anything. Outside of Kashmir, we've been able to, like I say, dialogue, build our network, and we've built in that strength. It's very difficult, obviously, because within Kashmir, we know nobody's allowed to move, the exacerbation of COVID. But now that that is becoming clear, we kind of then have to build that up and just put the pressure on everything, on everybody, on everywhere. Our English government, UK government said they were meant to be having a meeting with Modi about all of this, but COVID was stopping it. Now COVID isn't stopping it in the same way. Plus they can still have Zoom meets. So we need to go back. For me, you know, big health, human rights organizations need to be allowed in there. We need to be putting pressure on the Indian government to allow that.
You are upside down, Claire. Okay, you are straight now. No, we can't hear you. We can't hear you. Anyway, I think we'll move on to Frank now.
Yes, yes, while you were upside down, I was kicked out of and had to relink myself another time. I think COVID is a chance. Why? Because in most of our societies, we have step by step a functioning process to deal with testing, with vaccination, with healthcare, and others, and dealing with the economic consequences of the restrictions. But in Kashmir, it's just the opposite. There is less than low standards happening. Not enough testing, not enough vaccination, not enough healthcare system. And therefore, what is needed now, concrete information, what is happening, the figures, concrete cases from Kashmir, to bring it to the knowledge of the international community, that they see, okay, in my country, it might be difficult. We have only 60% of the people vaccinated, or 50, or there are some 100 people or some 1,000 people dead. But if we hear that Kashmir is looking at COVID-19, a real worse, I don't say hell, but a much worse place, people are touched and they see that the restrictions of the Indian administration are a punishment of the will, of the intentions, of the desire of the people on the ground. Therefore, what we need, and I need it here in Brussels, concrete figures. What does COVID-19 mean for the ordinary population? Figures and names. Thank you. It can be something to motivate, to mobilize people.
Thank you, sir. Mrs. Shawl.
Yes, thank you. Thank you,
Mr. COVID-19.
Yes.
That has slowed down our movement. How are you going to regenerate?
Yes, number one.
Can you come a little bit to the screen, Mr. Shawl? Professor Shawl can move. Yes.
We should remember that COVID-19, the global pandemic, when world tried to protect the people from this life-threatening corona, India used it as a cover-up smoke screen to push forward political agenda of assimilating the state of Jammu and Kashmir in the Union of India through some unilateral measures in contravention of international laws and specific UN resolutions. It is our responsibility. What happened during these months, more than 25 months, what we have learned that Kashmiris have lost everything during these months. they have lost their identity. But during these months, we, the people of Jammu and Kashmir, try to reach to every corner of the world. We developed links between different international platforms, between different people working for the human rights. And we have to transfer this moment from Indian held Kashmir to international community, because they have been victimized. There is no space for them to have a single word to say for the freedom movement. We have heard that in last 2 days, they have terminated more than 25 government servants, and they have noticed that any professional or a graduate who wants to apply for government job, if he is or he was or his family was or is related to any freedom political party, they will not get the jobs. In this scenario, it is our responsibility to take this matter in our hands and go to the diplomatic corridors and to the United Nations different institutions, UN Security Council members, and we should go also to the United Nations Human Rights Council and take up the matter with these personalities to get relief for the people of Jammu and Kashmir. And this is the right time for us to work hard more than what we are doing.
Thank you, Mrs. Shaw. I would come back to you in a minute. First, I want to hear from Graham, please. Graham.
Thank you, Majid. There's lots of headline ammunition available to us. Mention about, lockdown. We've had lockdown. They've had lockdown in Kashmir since well before our lockdowns. There's lots of headline links we can make. But the problem is, it's reach, isn't it? We have a very limited reach. Everybody that's on here now has obviously knows people, has some contacts, and may have social media platforms, but it's very, very limited. And I think what we need to do is we're still in the creating an awareness mode at the moment. We're nowhere near the levers of power. We have no armies. We have no state that's prepared to support us. So effectively, we're trying to create awareness, whether it's short term or long term, as Joseph talks about. So we need to work on journalists. We need journalists to report on what's happening in Kashmir, and also supporting self-determination. That might be a bit for some of them, but nevertheless, either or both of those concepts. We need social media ads. Now we need to raise money for advertisements we use through social media, because the states would generally not be able to block that. It might in India, but they probably won't block it in the West. So we should pay for ads to promote it. So even if we can't, in our small platforms, reach many people, if you pay a couple £100, you can reach hundreds of thousands of people. So we need to do that seriously and work together. The social movements that was before, yes, we need to work with them. Political parties, we have to lobby political parties to get self-determination, infiltrating within those movements. Something which I'm sure Joseph would said should have been done years ago. Well, we didn't, did we? So therefore it needs to be done now. So it's all about creating awareness and promotion. We need to work together. Forget what political views you have on the rest of the world. If you believe in self-determination, whether you're from the left or the right or the centre or from nowhere, work together and use the tools that are out there. Social media advertising, I think, is just one obvious thing I'm throwing out there, and continue lobbying journalists to report on what's happening in Kashmir. It's not happening, is it? We read very little about that. And I know there's a lockdown in India, of course, but journalists have ways of finding out if they want to. So lobby them to say it's your duty to talk, actually, more importantly, in areas that we can't get normally. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Is Zubair there? No, it doesn't seem.
Yes, no, I'm here.
Okay, you're very quickly, Zubair.
No, I would like to simply adopt what has been said by Mrs. Scholl and also by Graham Williamson. I think I just simply agree with that, what has been said.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed.
Well, 3 points basically. One is that India as a state has even used a global pandemic as a blessing in disguise in Kashmir. So one point to make is that this is a state which doesn't spare even pandemic to carry out what it has been all along in several decades. Point number two, as pointed out that there is no coverage, say, in mainstream media or social media. But remember, after August 5, 2019, I think I remember for the next 6 months or so, there were extensive coverage, in international media, including the Western media. So many articles, but as it happens, once the date of abrogation, became a bit distant, so there was less and less coverage. So one notion about this is that a brutal state can continue to exercise brutality, but one day, if the voices of freedom are kept alight, that brutality comes out, clearly, and something justice occurs. Last point I would like to make is regarding Mr. Bhatt pointed out, a very important, I think, futuristic, that if you look at Afghanistan or the region, somehow it seems that history doesn't move. So we are principally, I think, more than 20 years back in Afghanistan. And if this brutal regime of Modi does what it is doing in Kashmir, one point that to make is that day is not far that again we go back to the 1990s militant ground in Kashmir. Is it in the interest of the region or Pakistan or India itself or the international community? That is something, we have to highlight.
Thank you, Dr. Ishaq. Very, very strong points there, particularly the militancy part of it. Joseph, do you have any views?
Hello?
Yes, do you have any views, Joseph?
Yes, I
One
yes,
minute.
yes, 1 minute. Yeah, well, I'm a member of the executive committee on the indigenous peoples at the UN in New York, and we're trying to get a letter out to Pope Francis to apologize for the doctrine of discovery, which basically said if Christians land somewhere and the people there are not Christians, then they discovered it. That was what, 5 centuries ago. But if you look, the countries that are the most vaccinated are the European Christian countries and the United States. Only 1% of people in Africa have been vaccinated, and they were not traditionally Christians. And I think we need to draw the relationship between all oppressed peoples throughout the world. The situation of the Kashmiris is related to finding mass graves of Native American children in Canada, for one. And also, like I said, the fact that only 1% of people in Africa are vaccinated. So we need to bring some kind of public consciousness about the role that, European Christian imperialism, call it what you will, has played over the centuries, which of course have nothing to do with the real teachings of Christ.
Okay, thanks very much. Waqar Malik, are you there? Oh, he seems to have gone for a cup of tea.
Yes.
You heard everybody's views. Very,
Yes.
very briefly. Any views you have?
I'm really satisfied.
Okay, then thank you. Let's move on to our very dear friend who had been patiently waiting, and that is indeed, sir, Sajid Yusuf Saab. Where are you? You are there. I'm sorry you had to wait such a long time. And also, basically, Yasir Ahmad has been there for a very long time there. Sajid Yusuf Saab, let's have your crisp question. No, we can't hear you. I think you are muted. Yes, you are muted.
Okay.
Now I can
So,
hear you. Yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very much, Barrister Trambu. So although the part of my question already been answered by Graham and Dr. Ishtiaq, but still I think there are so many things need to be answered and need to be explained. So my question is, has the Indian administration taking advantage of the pandemic lockdown to enforce repressive steps to revoke Jammu and Kashmir laws and enact new laws to bring about a demographic change? So this is the first part of my question. And the second part of my question, why do you find an international indifference to such ruthless change in the rule of law in the occupied territory?
Thank you very much, Sajid Yusuf Saab. But broadly speaking, this has been answered as you said yourself. Well, I would put it to the panel, why international indifference? And I will start with, is he there? Graham, I will start with you.
Thank you, Majid. It's very hard to hear. There's a lot of background noise, Majid. I don't know if anybody's could perhaps put themselves on mute if they're not speaking. Sorry about that. It's just.
Can you hear it now?
That's a lot.
I got the noise out of way, and it comes mostly from Frank.
It's not Frank's fault, I don't think. Majid, I couldn't hear. Could you just briefly tell me what the question was again, please?
Question was basically on this abrogation. Why is there international indifference to such ruthless changes in rule of law in the occupied territory?
Well, I think it's obvious. I think we've mentioned it before. It's because it doesn't suit states to expose their own skeletons in similar situations in their own country. I mean, it's not that if it was just on human rights, we would say there's a problem and should they have done that and what's the consequences of done that? They're looking far beyond that, saying, well, hang on, if we supported this and you know, would we be exposed? Would we then have the world coming after them or the big powers or whomever? And I think generally they take the cautious view or protective view in some cases, not to rock that boat. I think it's very, very simple. And I think we need to go beyond chest beating and saying, well, it's human rights. Yeah, so it is human rights, but they don't care.
Yeah.
And I think Claire made a very good point earlier, which is really getting to the heart of things. Even if they don't have a skeleton, and I think the UK is probably better than most because in the Scottish situation, it's allowed a referendum and others debate now. But nevertheless, the economy and trade is one which these countries use against other countries to say, well, if and India's done this on numerous occasions, said, well, if you don't like what we're doing, we're not going to trade with you or we'll put barriers against you, etc., etc. So that's the real world. And I think we need to go beyond our emotions, dare I say it, and move into the practicalities. What can we practically do to move the things forward? Appealing for human rights is not going to work because, you know, the states have lots of power and little old me and Joseph and everybody else, we've got no power really other than our voice and our connections. And we need to use it more than we're doing. Thank you, Majid.
Thank you, sir. Claire, very quickly.
Very quickly. Sorry, I had so much going on in my head now, and now it's all gone. Yes, very quickly.
But don't go upside down again.
The raising awareness today. That's for me. There was nothing in the media, even to October, November 2019. There was nothing because I was looking for it. You know, had to go online to find it. So raising awareness today, it's hashtag Red for Kashmir Day. Global, international, people turn your profiles red, upload something red. I've got us shared online, hashtag Red for Kashmir. We're on the streets, we're protesting. Look for your demonstration, look for your protest. It's dead simple. It's red for awareness. It's the most vibrant color that we can get attention. It's a little start. I actually think I like what Graham said, they're building on. If we challenge this status quo, we know India are notorious to deal with. If we got the weapons out of there, if we stopped dealing with the weapons, if people took that bold step, I actually think over a time, both Pakistan and India and Kashmir and their countries would benefit economically because they wouldn't be spending the money on the weapons. We wouldn't, they'd be, you know, it would be bringing that peace to the area would then, you know, this is the irony, economics wise, what's holding us back just now, if we could get to the other side of it, if India could see, or these countries could see how much more better off they would be and their people would be to the other side of that. And that's something I think to work with and explore. If economics is seen as such a big power in our world, then we, with the, as you're saying, they don't care about the human rights, they care about money. So the halfway meeting is how can we show that by caring about human rights, you're going to fuel your economy. The awareness, the more we bring to this, the more heads we've got to solve this, and people that are sitting somewhere. This process for Red for Kashmir, we've made, you know, it's become just as important as the awareness day itself. The connections with so many people, brilliant brains, brilliant minds that I'd never met before, we're able to discuss. So raising awareness, looking at changing that status quo, keep having the dialogues and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Frank, very quickly.
I think it is totally, I think it's totally inadequate to speak of indifference, to think at indifference of the international media, international public. No, by this, we are disarming ourselves. There are certainly traditional media who report, not enough. There's a social media, there's the international community. European Parliament has raised the voice. Brussels, Foreign Affairs Ministry of the European Union, EAS, has raised its voice. Geneva, the human rights structures, they have raised their voice. And never forget this proverb in a lot of languages, to make a hole in the most hardest stone, granite, for example, the best way is the permanent drop of water on the same spot. Therefore, continue with our efforts, try to enlarge our scope, but never think there's indifference. We have to be stronger. And the last remark to Majid. Thank you, Majid. Thank you that you changed the setting of these Zoom meetings. European Parliament means you speak 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Sometimes I thought in the meetings you organized 6, 7, 8, 10 minutes, and people added and added. Now, the formula which you choose now for today, the question time, is much more interactive, and it is possibly not satisfying for everyone who would like to speak 20 minutes, but for someone who has to listen, not among us 11 here, or how many we are, but for someone who's listening, it's much, much more interesting. And therefore, my recommendation, Majid, continue with the format of question time. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Ishtiaq, very quickly, sir.
Well, from international indifference, what I understand is the indifference of the UN Security Council. I remember posing this question to UN Secretary General Boutros Ghali back in 1997 when he visited Islamabad, and I was then a working journalist based here. When I asked him that why the UN Security Council is not implementing its resolutions, his frank answer was, blunt answer was that it is a political body. So decision making at the UN Security Council level takes place on the basis of political factors, and the veto powers determine the outcomes. So if that be the case, since I am participating from Islamabad, and I think I should pinpoint the fact that over the course of last 40 years, when Pakistan was involved in 2 major wars on behalf of the United States, there were, a couple of great opportunities during this time when we could have negotiated our terms of strategic agreement with the United States and other powers in a favorable manner by getting a grand compromise on the Kashmir question. But what we did is that we served their interests, and in return we got, simply dollars for the work we did. There were opportunities, great opportunities of settling Kashmir purely on realpolitik basis, which is where, which is what determines the international politics in contemporary world. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before I pass it on to Professor Shaul and Zubair Awan, I want to take one more question that I have received a very important question from Srinagar, which I want to take on, but the chap doesn't want to be named one of the political personalities of Kashmir. But just let me go to Yasser Ahmed. Is he there? I don't think he's there. Let me go to Sajjad Yusuf Saab. Sajjad Yusuf Saab, you heard everybody. Any views you have?
Thank you very much. To be honest, I must admit, and what just Frank said, that it was very comprehensive discussion, and because my question was last, so although it was answered before, but I didn't get anything else to ask, so I asked. So it was answered very well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I have a very important question for the panel. Actually, two, but I've chosen one of them, and that will be the last question. The question is something like this. It had come to me via email, which I had shared with the panel earlier on. The question reads: since August 5th, 2019, India has banned all political activities of pro-freedom groups. The entire leadership is arrested or house arrested. The people of Jammu and Kashmir are put under horrific fear not to raise any voice against India and the human rights abuses. Is it not, and this is the question, and this is the cracks, is it not the time that the Kashmiri diaspora leadership should take the lead of the moment by declaring Kashmir exile government? And I would go to begin with the Kashmiri leader himself, that is Professor Shaul. Professor Shaul, can we have your views on this? You are muted, you are muted. Yes.
I think it's a very, very important question, that how to present the pain and the agony and the suffering of the people of Jammu and Kashmir to the international community, number one. Number two, how to fill the gap, because all democratic space has been denied to our political activists, to all the pro-freedom leaders. They have been incarcerated. So this is a challenging situation. And I think at such times, we have seen the apartheid movement of South Africa. And during the apartheid movement, it was the diaspora, the South African diaspora, which worked wonders, and they were a trigger to work against the apartheid. And similarly, it is a timely requirement that all the diaspora groups converge on one single narrative, because narrative is very important. And for us at this time, the narrative is that how the Kashmiris will finally have a tryst with their destiny, and they will exercise their right to self-determination, because that is the main objective, and that is the roadmap to freedom. And I think we need to interact, we need to converge, and we need to evolve a narrative. And all the Kashmiri diaspora, which is scattered in different parts of the world, and of this diaspora.
Professor Shaul,
Yeah.
We know this all, but the question was simply, should there be a Kashmir government in exile? That's it. We know we have to convert. We know we are disunited. We know all those things.
As far as the government in exile is, concerned, I think you can give it a different name. You can call it something different, but basically what is needed is that there has to be a united action.
Okay, we take your point. Let's go to Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, sir, please.
Well, I will, if there is any big idea that I can take away from this today's wonderful session, it is this, the point made in this question at least, This is a very, all great things happen, in my opinion, out of sheer imagination. In our discussion today or discussions before, obviously we talk about indifference and we talk about, our own frustrations with the prevailing situation and the freedom quest and self-determination of the Kashmiris and their sufferings and all that. But at the same time, we are also searching for new creative ideas as to how to break the logjam. And I think if in South Africa's case, this has played a part, a Kashmir government in exile is a very powerful idea, and I think we should give it a serious thought.
Thank you, sir. Zubair Awan, are you there?
I'm here, sir.
Can we have your views on this before I go to the other diaspora? This is all Kashmir and Pakistan related group now. Let's have final word on Kashmir side from Zubair Awan, who is a Kashmiri.
Thank you very much, Barrister Trumbu. And I think in a nutshell, yes, I would say that Kashmiri diaspora has to take lead and declare some sort of Kashmiri exile. The government, when we say government, then we have to talk about the sheer nitty-gritties of it. But given that we have a very specific and very unique case of different constituent geographical elements of the erstwhile state of Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir. So we have to be sensitive towards the situation of AJK, the Gilgit-Baltistan, the Indian-held Kashmir, Jammu and Ladakh. All these things we have to take into consideration, and whether the framework within which we have to work, it is only to be focused on the Kashmiris' promised right to self-determination. So if that is what we are going to be looking at, I think Kashmiri government in exile, name can be any, but it has to be focused on that.
Thank you,
I would say yes.
Okay, thanks. Frank.
Three short points. I think it's a thrilling idea. It should be for the Indian administered or Indian occupied, however you call it, part of Jammu and Kashmir. Second, it has not to learn from the UK or the US example, where a government is one party in general. Okay, there was in England, remember a coalition. But the international experience is you have coalition governments. That means, second part, it has to be a broad composition. And third, don't follow the Somalia example with more than 90 ministries at a certain moment. No, follow the example of the advanced democracies in the world, which have 15 to 20 ministries, not more. 15 to 20 ministers, and then you can have one deputy minister for each to satisfy the egos and the parties of a lot. But please, not more than 20 ministers, otherwise, buff. It would be a beehive of whatever going around, maximum 20 ministers and maximum 20 deputy ministers. That would be really enough. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Graham, please.
Very quickly, yes, it is a good idea, but it wouldn't be an exile government, because an exile government in India and then have left and living over in the West or wherever. It's not an exile government. We do have presidents. There are a number of exiled, not government, sorry, another governments, diaspora governments.
Yeah.
One important one is the one the Tamils have done, the transnational government of Tamililand. It's not an exile government because they've never had a government over there, but it does carry weight. Of course, it's self-identifying, so we're a government, but they are making great strides in the UN on certain countries, and they're having successes because, rightly or wrongly, people seem to think, oh, maybe this is a state, maybe this is a burgeoning state. It's not a disunited community with all different political factions. So I think you must do it. It won't be an exile government. It'll be a government of Kashmir. And as a side issue, I'm a great believer in cross-party and organisational cooperation. And as a side benefit, if you get Kashmiris, whatever their political views are, on board, you'll make a great success. So you've got to go for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Clear?
Yes.
Yeah, go on. We need your answer. You heard the question.
I thought you might want it quickly. No, I mean, obviously I'm not a Kashmiri, so it doesn't come from me, but I know it's been explored before. But, there is, as you know, we don't need to go back into it, but the disunity that's there is causing huge problems, really huge problems. So a kind of a way of working together with a respect, because the politics can't come until the human rights come and the self-determination come. So there's so much wasted energy, I believe, before, it's getting put in the wrong place. So, I don't know what the obstacles are. I mean, where's Kashmir's voice? That's what I see. Who's speaking for them? The leadership are up, the people are clamped. Who is standing up and saying, we are Kashmir? They've not got the opportunity. So the government, some form of body speaking for them, and a coalition one is probably the way to stop everybody going, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. Because that would be the next thing. Everyone would jump on board to be Kashmir's voice. So yeah, I think it's a salute. Somebody has to speak for them. So something's going to have to give somewhere. This can't go on.
Thank you. Joseph, do you have any views on the exile part of it? You are muted. You are muted.
So I still feel that we need to draw the connection between what's going on with Kashmir, the indigenous people, what I mentioned in Canada,
absolutely correct.
the Palestinians, and also 1% of Africa is vaccinated. And one of the ways to do this is through the Universal Periodic Review and the monitoring mechanisms of the covenants. And as far as I know it, the Universal Periodic Review, for example, barely mentions how our country's doing in regards to self-determination. I don't recall that when India went before the UPR process. So we as NGOs have to put pressure, like Claire said, pressure on governments to make sure that they address that issue. And then it gets disseminated throughout the world so people can make up their own minds and do whatever, mobilize shame, as they say, or whatever. So those are some of my thoughts.
Thanks very much. Mr. Bhatt, Latif Bhatt. Can you hear me? Mr. Bhatt?
Yes, now.
You raised your own hand, and I think that was on a different topic. I think Afghanistan issue raised by Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed. And then if you want to briefly touch on that and briefly touch on this exile government thing very, very quickly so that we can close it now.
Okay, thank you for consulting me in this issue. On exile government, we as Kashmiris are lacking the unity. If we are, there are many groups worldwide. If they should get together, discuss this issue, then we can go further step.
Okay, that's good. anything you wanted to say on this militancy part, which Dr. Ishtiaq, and you had raised your hand at that time?
Yes, I have already raised this question that there is the dimension that militancy will grow and grow because the Kashmir militancy background, when we see, it started when the Afghan war jihad was at peak, and it is going again at peak, so it will revive. I agree with this.
Okay, all right. Well, that I think brings this interactive session to conclusion. I had hoped for 2 hours, but I'm pleased to see it was 2 hours and 29 minutes, which is not bad. I'm very grateful. I know today is a day when all the activists on working on Kashmir have lots of commitments, and they will have to attend the other engagements as well. Graham has to attend, Claire has to attend, I'm sure Sajid Yusuf Saab has to attend, Latif Saab has to, Shal Saab has to attend, and maybe in Pakistan, Dr. Ishtiaq will have to attend. But my really sincere gratitude to all of you and to the intervenists as well. It was a very, very, definitely a very illuminating session. And as suggested by Frank and also agreed by Graham and followed by Claire, we will continue these interactive sessions. Once again, thank you very much. And let's continue with the International Day of Lockdown Territories for rest of the day. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Pleasure
you.
to meet
Bye.
everybody. Well done.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Joseph, Claire,
Bye-bye.
and everybody else.
Have a good day.
Bye.